All right, everyone, welcome along to another episode of Martin's World. Guys, if you'd like to support the show, if you'd like to support the fight for cannabis legalisation in Ireland, you can do so by signing up to the patreon.com/Martin's World. You can also make donations in the form of bitcoins through the website martinsworld.ie. And all of the funds gathered there will be used to establish a cannabis activist hub here in Cork City so we can bring together the cannabis community so we can be better represented in the fight for cannabis legalisation in Ireland. Guys, the guest in today's show is Conor Macleod. Conor is an author of a book called A Case for Cannabis, and it's a very interesting book which covers the wide range of topics around cannabis, going into things such as the terpenes within it, cannabinoids within it, and some of the regulatory stuff. You know, there's a wide range of topics there covered in the book, and it gives a good introduction into each of those topics, and it doesn't overwhelm you with too much information on either. He's also the creator of Canna Man comic books, and you can find those books and also his Case for Cannabis book up on Amazon also. You'll find him over on YouTube and Twitter too at CannamaTV. So guys, without further ado, Conor Macleod of CannamaTV. Right, so Conor Macleod, welcome along to Martin's World podcast. It's a pleasure to reverse the roles. I got to feature on your own podcast just the other day, and that's up in line now for people to go check out. They can find it on Cannaman TV, is the YouTube channel, if memory serves correct. Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's I'm glad to be here, Martin.
Excellent, man. Good to hear. So, yeah, I just wanted to get into it there because we were touching off of something there. It's like the reason why you were getting started on this, like, you know, it wasn't a kind of an egotistical kind of pursuit or anything like that. You know, it was about a message, like, so. That's kind of why I wanted to just get started. I'd like to pick up on that point. There is what motivated you to get going with Cannaman TV.
In all honesty, it's a kind of, I'm a big believer in like manifestation. And my son was born about 6 years ago, so it kind of started off from that, where it was like I became frighteningly aware that he's going to have to engage with the same process I'm going to have to engage with. It's finding your purpose, but you're dealing with this financial barrier initially. So he's going to have to. It's like essentially the basis of what you're doing, what I'm doing is fine, but you have other things to bring in. You've got finance, you've got income, you need to pay for stuff, this kind of stuff. So it was just that basis of, well, I need to do something. So that was kind of the spark. Then always been into drawing. So I ended up doing, it was just essentially a concentrated effort. So I ended up kind of doing lots of books, lots of kids' books. They're all on Amazon, actually. So I did that over the next few years. That was from about 2014 onwards. And then about 3 years ago, the entire time, obviously, consuming cannabis, obviously. About 2 or 3 years ago, I kind of tried to incorporate that thing where I was like aware that the cannabis industry is continuously growing. Excuse the pun. The culture's not yet over in the UK, but the counterculture. And it's not even that. It's like this underground basis in which everybody's aware. It's only that it's not getting put out mainstream. The narrative's obviously still relatively frowned upon. But in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a lot of little cultural facets that will come into play. There are lots, much more accessories. We've already begun to see it with CBD. CBD just arrived 2015, 2016, and much more of that kind of thing is going to start following to the point where it will become a normalized culture like you see in a lot of parts of the world. So I kind of want to be part of that as well. So I was kind of trying to incorporate the drawing I was doing with this desire to be part of the cannabis industry. And I kind of came across that thing where it's like, a cartoon character. So my intention is to then take it forward and move it from the comic books into the animation, which is going to be coming in the next, hopefully next couple of months. But so that's kind of what got moving forward. And then at the same time, I was like, well, I want to, it's like anything, you kind of want to branch out in as many different dynamics you want to do. You want to kind of build the foundation for something that can continue to expand continuously, because then you're not staying in the same regiment. So interviewing individuals also kind of gets you out there publicly. I was always interested in talking to people. I'm a very social individual. So all these things kind of came together. And at the same time, I wanted to do obviously YouTube, which was going to incorporate into the interviewing people. But I didn't want it to be an illegitimate platform where people just thought it was just some stoner sitting preaching what he believes with no credibility whatsoever. So that's where I was like, well, I'll write a book, and that's where essentially the book, the incentive for the book came. So I spent about I think it was about 4 or 5 months researching every single minute of the day. I just as much as I could. And that's when the book formed, essentially, so I can give a credibility to what I was talking about for the channel, and just to make it more authentic, essentially.
Yeah. And that book is it's incredibly in depth. I just got a copy of it there earlier in the week from yourself. I didn't get a chance to read the whole lot of it, but I did get to have a quick sweep through it, and it's quite in depth. In fairness, like right down to looking at terpenes, you go down to cannabinoids and things like that. So it's well worth checking out. What's the title of the book again? For people.
It's called A Case for Cannabis. Yeah, I appreciate your comments on that, Martin, actually, because the reason, that's the thing, that was the whole basis behind the book, is that there's so many different variables when it comes to the endocannabinoid system, and the same approach can be taken to the different social factors behind cannabis. So, and the social factors including obviously recreational policy, the basis of how you integrate this with society. There's obviously all these different multitude of factors. So I was like, well, I wanted to create a broad spectrum analysis,
Yeah.
essentially, of the main components that the cannabis topic surrounds. So I mean, even a chapter breakdown, essentially, is like I go from chapter 1, which is what is cannabis, just giving the sativa, indica, ruderalis, because essentially that's the initial stumbling block for individuals that are new to cannabis. They're like, what? So there's 3 kinds of cannabis, and that just immediately, that's the first the first distraction almost. So I break down that and how the different individuals that came to the terms of that kind of thing. And then I think I'll move it through. There's the endocannabinoid system gets mentioned, endocannabinoid system deficiency.
On that earlier part
Just,
there, the breakdown of the plant, that was something when I was in college, I was doing a degree in herbal science, and I brought this up to some of my botany lecturers and things like that, and I was trying to get their opinions on it. But because it was cannabis, they were just like, they didn't even want to entertain the conversation, but it annoyed me. But the whole argument around like whether cannabis is one species or whether it's 3 species, because it was Lamrick, I believe, or no, Carlos Linnaeus, who first defined it as cannabis sativa. And then I think it was Lamrick came on long afterwards then, and he said that it was the indica that was there as another species.
yeah.
But then the argument kind of kicked off that no, cannabis is that's what the argument is. Either it's 3 species or it's one species made up of many subspecies. And
Yeah.
where do you lie in that, or did you get into that kind of discussion with yourself?
And in all honesty, because of the fact it does become so complex, I didn't really. Most of the book wasn't really. The last chapter was final thoughts, which essentially I put in my opinions, brief opinions on each of the topic. But the basis of the chapters is kind of like an outline. So yeah, it's one of the difficult things, because it's like, in all honesty, my knowledge of botany, botanical stuff and that kind of shit, it's extremely limited. So to even go into the conversation, it's like, I really don't have a position. It's like, it really doesn't matter nowadays, because we're dealing with hybrids as well. So it's just like the growing process. Yeah, I really don't think it's relevant nowadays, because I think it's one confusion point, and we kind of got it sorted. That's what it kind of seems like,
Yeah, that would have been my point. All right, is that it just adds to confusion, because people think it's very simplistic that, oh, indica numbs your pain, sativa is kind of head high. But as you said, like now with all the hybrids, with all the crossbreeding, with all of that going on, there is no indica strain as such, and there is no sativa strain as such. The land races they're very hard to find now. Everything has some sort of a cross. Been introduced because of the way in which cannabis has been dealt with over the last 100 years, which is a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
But it does actually add to confusion. But again, my position on it is that there is only one species of cannabis, and that species of cannabis is highly polymorphic, meaning it can take on it can adapt to many different
Yeah.
environments. But when it left alone in whichever environment, it will start developing the niches for that environment again.
Yeah.
Just given the type of plant it actually is.
I'd
But
probably
that,
say the thing of importance when it comes to that indica sativa thing is that, I mean, ruderalis only ever included with autoflowers, and when it comes to sativa or indica, it shouldn't really be mentioned as sativa indica. As you know, it's just cannabinoid profile is the important factor. It's like what cannabinoid profile is the product that you're consuming. The basis of its indica sativa is kind of secondary to really the cannabinoid profile of the product.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that. And I think actually I might have used the wrong words a while ago. I think actually you're describing it better than me did. The book, it was a broad spectrum of topics rather than an in-depth analysis, because it's a great way for a person to get an introduction to the broad spectrum of topics around cannabis, such as like what we just started with there was around the species of the plant, but also then the cannabinoids, the terpenes and things like that. You give a very good introduction without overwhelming the person with too much information on that one topic. If it's up for the person then afterwards, if there's a particular topic within the book they want to go and find out more about, I think you've even well referenced as well. There's good references there, so people can go back and look at the sources of your information. So it's well done on that book. In fairness, it's I don't think it's something I would be able to do myself. I don't know.
I'd highly doubt that, Martin. That's, in all honesty, I highly doubt that. You're already pursuing a path that it seems to be, you're an individual that's going to make a mark, and that's evident. You just need to kind of, the belief is a huge thing, I think, in society. I don't know if I mentioned, but I'm like a big believer in manifestation, and I do think that the initial basis of that starts at your thought process. If you maintain belief in your thoughts and your ability, because we are all creators. All of our ideas form life as we see it. I mean, the reality is the room that I'm sitting in, the room that you're sitting in, the room that all the viewers are sitting in, every factor of it was created first with an idea. The bed, the chair, the laptop, the microphone. It was an idea that preceded the creation of the thing, and I just think that kind of can be understated when it comes to that. But yeah, I really enjoyed writing the book, and the references in particular, I wanted it to be as academically viable as possible, because there's no point in writing a book if it's not going to be of substance. Just like anybody can write a book, and I think that would be the thing to do, because even when I first started, my partner would back me up on this. That, like, I actually wrote the book, and I remember saying to her numerous times, I think this is how you write a book. Like, that's and the basis of the book was because I knew how to write an essay, and an essay is telling a story, and you're dealing with maybe an introduction, a conclusion, and maybe half a dozen paragraphs at best. So if you break that down into a book's form, instead of like 200 words a paragraph, 2,000 words a chapter, and then you've got an entire, that's like 15,000 words you've got right there, and it's essentially a long form essay in which a book is. So I just thought, and because I think that's the basis of it, the book is a long form essay in a sense, and because cannabis is such a diverse and complex topic, it inevitably made the book relatively complex. I think that was one of the criticism that I felt myself, was like, bit of an amateur mistake. You have to give like breathing room to absorb some information, and I think that's one of the things where I've had feedback from people, was that there's not really any space to absorb information because it's so packed with reference. And I think that's maybe a criticism, but at the same time, that was the intention, just because it's impossible. With each year that goes by, there's an additional element of difficulty when it comes to the cannabis, and it's often sometimes political, which doesn't help, and it is distractive. But just because of the fact that it's the very nature of the subject is complex in itself.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. It is an incredibly complex bloody subject. If I was to even begin to write a book, that would be my biggest issue. I wouldn't know where to begin. But because, as you kind of said, like, that there's just so much to be covered. You either cover it all, or you cover one thing and you go into it in depth, and then a lot of the times that's only for a specific niche of an audience. So you know, and for me, I think a lot of my own biggest problem was the criticisms, the stigma I came up against over the years. It's definitely impacted upon me, where I've been kind of left with a bit of, I don't know, a bit of disbelief in myself, I suppose, of certain kinds.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of the times I'll be typing out an email to invite somebody onto the show for a podcast, and then the thought will creep into my mind, oh, this person's just going to think, oh, I'm not going on there, it's just another stoner podcast or something like that, and just this self-doubt, like, and it comes from definitely the impact, or the influence of these people who I've met, and they've led a residual impact on me, like, where it brings up self-doubt, like, oh, you're just a stoner, or the judges, looking at me, oh, you're just an addict, it does affect you. Have you ever been in a situation like that yourself? Have you been caught by the law, I suppose, with cannabis at all?
I've never actually been caught. However, there's been an occasion, the closest time I ever got caught with cannabis was where the police drove past and then jumped out, and they thought I was somebody that was like outside Lidl or something and doing something inappropriate, and I had cannabis on me at the time, and that's fortunately as close as it came to that. But yeah, it's certainly, unfortunately, a constant possibility, because of the fact that we're dealing with a very ignorant perspective on what cannabis is in the UK. Frustratingly, the UK is archaic towards cannabis. It really is, and it's just evident with every regimented fucking issue that you're dealing with. Every time there's a step forward, it seems there's two step backs. We did decriminalise to an extent in 2006, I think, 2005, when it got to, I think, declassified to Class C substance, maybe. And then 2 years later, it was back. It's exhausting. So there just needs to be legitimate change. The doubt you were describing, though, Martin, as well, that thing where it's like, there's a wee voice in your head that tells you it's not possible, or you can't do it, or who are you to do it, or this is a joke, you're not somebody that you think you are, all these kind of things. You know, I think that's actually a consequence of how society is structured. You know, society is inevitably changing, but the basis of it is still relatively industrially based. So an industrial society requires machine pushers. So that's why the school system, although it's changed right now because of the situation, it kind of trains you for a job and not for an identifying purpose. And I think that's what the thing what happens is that when you identify a purpose, you immediately act awkwardly compared to others that are engaged with the financial pursuit, you know. And I think that's the thing, is because most people just show up to their job and like I said before, their life's based on their job, and most of the time their self-esteem is based on their job. And the reality is, if you're able to meditate yourself in a position where you know that it's not finance, it's purpose, then strange things start to happen, doors start to open to you, and it's like almost like the universe responds to you. There's an author called Stephen Pressfield who's got a book called the War of Art, not the Art of War, Sun Tzu, but the War of Art, and that's what he goes into detail of that, of this difficulty, this like hurdle barrier that continuously pursues itself, like it appears itself in one way or another. One of the things will be just difficulty sitting down. You mentioned a minute ago there, having even writing an email, and immediately self-confidence drips away from you, and it's like there's this like polarized position, because the thing that preceded that was your enthusiasm and your excitement, and I can do this, and achievement, and and possibility, and then for some reason there's this other little factor. You know, and so it's extremely interesting, and I do think that that's something, when acknowledged, can be used to your advantage, almost like a flare in the sky kind of thing. As soon as you start feeling that, no, I shouldn't do it, almost hear it as like a bang, right? You're on the right path, because it's only telling you that because there's this force. And Stephen Pressfield, the author, he refers to the thing that's guiding you, the thing that initiates that direction, the positivity, the potential. He refers to that as the muse. You know, and that's it. He talks about it in almost like it's a conscious element that is going to reward you for sacrifice. And the sacrifice is pursuing discipline, engaging in repetition of your craft. And the sacrifice is not being able to relax and watch TV and just fucking dull your brain, essentially, almost. Yeah. There's a negative perspective, but, you know.
Yeah, no, definitely these things of convenience in life can lead us to a life of a lack of discipline, really, to get up and want to do things. I see it so much around me. Something I try to encourage my kids actually is to try to be more creators rather than consumers in society, because I think we've an imbalance of consumers out there at the moment, and not enough people kind of lifting their weight, leading to a lot of the problems I suppose we see around us in society and in our communities and whatnot. Like just the fact that prohibition has managed to remain in place for so long, it just really goes to show that we're lacking some sorts of humanity. When in Ireland here, we had a woman who had to walk from Cork to Dublin just to raise awareness about our need for access to medical cannabis for her young daughter who suffered with epilepsy, and her name was Vera Toomey. And yet still the government don't do nothing. So there's a severe lack of humanity in people. And definitely, I think that the way in which kids and stuff get shaped in the schooling system, it does definitely take away that takes away something from them. Definitely for me, I was always a questioner in class, put up my hand, ask questions, you know, and I would get in trouble almost for that sometimes, you know. Martin, you're asking too many questions now, you know, and stop, you know, and get in line. So definitely we're not cut out for the way in which society wants to shape us anyway. Currently, it's not natural, it's not right. The Comic Man, Canna Man. Sorry, the Comic Man, the Canna Man comics. The Canna Man comics. How long ago did you start that?
I think actually the very first one that I actually uploaded is actually the one I would excuse me recommend everybody look at first, because as you can find on webtoons.com, and it's called Nature's Miracle Cure. And in retrospect, I maybe shouldn't have called it Nature's Miracle Cure, but you can find that on let's say webtoons.com, and it's about the endocannabinoid system, and it's just about how Canna Man uses a THC oil to then cure the police chief's endocannabinoid system. But so yeah, that was a kind of side point. But the reason why I got into that was that was about, I think it was March last year. I think I uploaded the very first one of that, I think, or maybe it was March 2018. But it's been about 2 years, I think. Cannaman's been in the construction, and Cannaman was, again, when I thought of the channel, and when I thought of the incentive to do the channel, essentially, unfortunately, we're in a situation where you're providing a representation. So the representation's got to form like a logo of some degree. And that's why I was like, well, a cartoon character, because like I was doing the illustrations all the time, it was just kind of like an organic step. So came up with Canna Man for a superhero type thing, and that's what's going to then proceed, because I've actually got, like I said, the animation is where the Canna Man is. I'm really excited about doing, but to be able to do interviews and to draw the cartoons and learn how to animate whilst maintaining, obviously, daily life is it's a difficult task. But yeah, Canna Man was just he's the symbol, he's the symbol of what it should be, and he's just obviously he's got his other character Donny, who's just a wee rabbit, and he's an absolute asshole, just for the counterbalance. And as I've came to actually draw more of them, because there are 14 Cannaman comics, and they're all available on webtoons, and then there are 29 single Skinner comics that I've done. And the reason why I did the single Skinner comics is because it was sustainable to do an 8-page comic over the course of a month whilst doing YouTube. It took an entire month to do the comics, so doing YouTube as well, as you know, is difficult. So so you have to sacrifice, but to stop drawing would be to lose a part of myself, essentially. So I had to come up with this thing where I wanted to keep the character alive. Sorry?
What's a single Skinner comic so against a comic? So 8 pages?
Yeah, the single Skinner comic is just 1 page, so that's why I call it a single Skinner. So yeah, I call it a single Skinner just so I could keep the fire burning and keep the characters alive. And that's the thing, because the characters, even though I create them, I feel very much like they're not a part of me. Even though the Cannaman represents, I would most likely say, my id or my ego, in the sense, whereas Donny's more the id, whereas Cannaman's a super ego and the ego, because the way they come across is Cannaman's very collected, methodical, that kind of thing, whereas Donny is very desire based. He's all like just wants to get wrecked all the time, and he's vulgar and that kind of thing. So I'm aware that with every artist, essentially, you're projecting a part of yourself onto your artwork to an extent, inevitably. And that's so as over time this has came to be a realization, if I'm being honest, because I didn't know this at the beginning. I just drew the fucking comic and got through it, and then as I'm looking over the work in the past, I'm looking over going, wait a minute, and then I'm understanding this, because obviously I'm a big fan of psychology as well, so doing a lot, obviously reading the psychology whilst doing this kind of allowed me to see an insight into it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I just thought, well, I'll do the single Skinner comic. It means I can make one of them like every 2-3 days. Well, you can find it on Twitter and Facebook, and I can also do the YouTube channel, and it just kind of keeps all elements of the situation burning, essentially.
Savage. And do you get much stigma because of that, or do you get much kind of kickback from people at all? Say within your community or family, anyone like that? Or would you rather not say?
No. That's okay, man. I'm totally fine with this. No, what I find quite funny about it, right, is that there is a variety at the moment, and I think it does kind of reflect what it's like in the cannabis community and society in general. I would say, actually, not the cannabis community, but society in general. There's a variety of responses. You get some people that are totally into cannabis, and they're like, this is fucking dynamite, keep going, man, this is just amazing, and they're just glad to be seeing this stuff and talking to me. You get other people that are extremely skeptical and very cautious of myself and the material I'm producing, because they still hold on to aged rhetoric, and that they've been spoon-fed, and this is what they initially, it's kind of like buzzwords in psychology when they fucking train people to respond in a certain way to a certain word, and that's what's happened. So when you say cannabis, people hear schizophrenia, or when you say cannabis, people hear laziness, and that's what it's kind of like. So there's like a cognitive response that is in place with some people, and this is where you see as the media has kind of increased with CBD and stuff like that percentage of people has been in decline, I would say. And that's what's been kind of refreshing about it. And but on a general basis, I would say the majority of people aren't really bothered. They just kind of don't see what the big deal is. They're just kind of most people know at least somebody that at least knows somebody that has benefited in some way. So most people, because it's not a part of their life, in a periphery sense, they've already accepted it. And I think this is the thing that doesn't get acknowledged, is that the majority of people, even at the polls, like the polls regularly, these stats they do, and these like meta-analyses of the public opinion, they always come away with a greater percentage of people that are either not bothered or in favor. And I think this is what causes the frustration and the difficulty when it comes to the cannabis community, because people know this, and I think we get given a lot of jargon and rhetoric that's out of date, and it just causes people to either shut off or just be annoyed that they're listening to the stuff. Skunk and psychosis and anecdotal is a derogatory word when it comes to this. It's anecdotal evidence that this individual was saved. There's anecdotal evidence that they were on death's door and now they're playing basketball. It's like, nah, man, that's not the truth.
Yeah, no, it is really frustrating when you see that, and especially knowing what I know, Coming from the academic background myself, I can understand the issues that are around the studies. So when they say, "Oh, there's only anecdotal evidence," and it's like there's a reason why there is so little evidence outside of anecdotal evidence, is because the studies are incredibly difficult to carry out. So, like,
Yeah.
imagine carrying out say a randomized controlled study on cannabis oil for epileptic kids, and you have to give one bunch of kids a cannabis oil, which is going to reduce their seizures, and you give the other bunch a placebo, and they're going to continue getting seizures. That's unethical. That's
Yeah.
wrong. Like, so it's very hard to carry out these kind of studies. Now, I use that kind of example there, but like you could give it to other patients, chronic pain and things like that. There is better ones there, but then you look at the issues that came up around that, and where a lot of the data comes from the US. Only now is it getting ironed out in the recent bill that went before the Senate, or no, the House of Congress, or whatever it is over there in America. It looks to sort out this mess around the research over there. So they had one source for cannabis all these years in America for studies. So if you wanted to carry out a federally approved study in America, you would have to get your cannabis through I think it was the University from Mississippi or somewhere like that.
Right.
And the stuff was terrible. And researchers for years been complaining about it, that it was full of sticks and stems and seeds, and some of the samples would be moldy and just not fit for purpose at all.
Yeah, totally agree, Martin. And I think one of the frustrations is that often that you just see the absolute absence. The same thing with psilocybin. You know, they had all this positive information in the 50s and the 60s, maybe slightly before that, maybe slightly after, and it just got silenced immediately because it didn't conform to what was previously expected from people that were in authority. So when they were like all these improvements in cognition and reduction in depression and addiction, this like this defied what the previously acknowledged concepts of addiction and depression were. So it was much more convenient politically to silence the base of the research, and much like cannabis, for different reasons. You know, industry, the paper industry, as you mentioned when you were on my podcast, actually, was the same thing. Was that the paper industry was crucial, as was the petrochemical industry and all these different other things. So yeah, man, it's exhausting that this is still going on because people are aware, and I think, like you mentioned before as well, hemp, an industrial term, but hemp is like the industrial basis for cannabis is relatively non-spoken about when you think about it. It's like it's always medicinal or recreational, you know, how much to grow, how much you're allowed to grow, the cannabinoid profile. Never they're talking about, yeah, you know, sustainably, it's much more convenient for the earth to use hemp products. You know, and this is huge. This is like an enormous issue that is kind of swept under the rug. And I think that when even the hemp industry, I'm hoping this year, there's a couple of the hemp manifesto was created, I think, through Rebecca Shaman, and there's a See Their Future campaign, and pockets of resistance, it seems, that seem to be building, which needs to increase for it to put on more pressure. And hopefully, actually, because of COVID this year, there is there is much more evident financially that cannabis is the go-to plant. You know, I think that's I constantly think that to myself. In the future, I hope I don't become that grumpy old man. Because, corporate cannabis, and there's like, you know, young ones coming in and they've got like their labels and their brands and their Starbucks cannabis. I'm cursing it with my banjo and my one tooth. You know?
Yeah, it is incredibly frustrating, but I do hope that, as you said, like hemp it has a lot of opportunities there for us, in terms of what it could offer us, for the environment, and in terms of environmentally friendly products, but also for jobs. There's some amount of jobs to be created. If we were to be just looking at hemp and not talking about cannabis for consumption for the drug-like purposes, but hemp just for industrial, like for making bags, for making fishing rods, and for making cars, for making all sorts of things. You can make houses from the bloody stuff. It's incredible the amount of stuff you can make from hemp. And we could be setting up across Ireland, across the UK. You could be having industries just around the processing of hemp that could be creating hundreds, thousands of jobs between growing, processing, and all of the new products that would be made from it. And then you go and look at what could be made from, if you were to actually legalize cannabis just outright. What an industry would be created from it, and all of the knock-on products then as well. And imagine how the art world would be influenced then as well, like, because you're an artist yourself, like, well, other people out there, I'm sure it would really inspire the muses within us all, to kind of go out there and pursue these kind of these artistic kind of pursuits, like.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I fully agree, Martin. And that's the thing. I think that's why they're listening to what you're saying there. Is like, you can understand why people that are ignorant of cannabis are frightened of it. Because if you were to use it for its full potential, it would change the landscape of human society. You know, just completely. Because you know, medically, and then recreationally, and then psychologically, creatively, you know, industry would shape in a completely different direction. And I think there are too many people that wouldn't want that for so many different reasons that it's just it becomes nauseating, really. You know, how difficult it will be to pursue. But yes,
Yeah.
cannabis is certainly good for that, for creativity. One of the things I'd put up a video actually after doing a little bit of research, and it was how cannabis, the basis of how cannabis encourages creativity. At least from this one of the studies that I'd come across, I'll have to send you the link just to, you know, give it credibility. Essentially, was that it increases. I think it was the frontal lobe is where creativity is acknowledged to be functioned through, you know, so it's the frontal lobe dynamic. So when you consume cannabis, it encourages cerebral blood flow to that region. So apparently, that which encourages consequently creative output, you know, and which is quite interesting, and it does give a little bit of creative credibility to why people say, "Oh, I smoke cannabis," and you know, I mean, what would be much more creative? It gives you like this cognitive spark. Really, it really does. Much similar to caffeine. Caffeine binds to I think it's a CB1, maybe CB2 receptor, which does a very similar function as well. Why interestingly, there's all these different comic book artists that swear by caffeine. I think there was a guy, Randy Glasbergen, who wrote that in one of his books. That is like there's something between caffeine and comic book drawing people. You know, it's like it's a CB receptor, man.
Yeah, quite possibly so. It's definitely something to be thought about, and it's interesting then as well. You bring caffeine in there, like there's another plant, like and we derive a drink from it. But again, it's the caffeine within the plant that we're after, and caffeine is a drug similar to the cannabis plant that has amazing bloody compounds in it: THC, CBD. One that my friend buddies are on about there now recently, and they're really thinking it's going to be the next big one is the CBG,
Yeah,
which is the cannabigerol, which again, it's a very interesting compound, and the benefits that can be brought from it. I first came across CBG before when I was a buddy of mine. He broke his was it his tibia and fibula, his leg, by Thai boxing, clashed the legs, two bones snapped. But
oh, sorry.
yeah, he was rubbing coconut oil that was infused with cannabis onto his leg um, after the accident that happened. So he got a removable type of cast. And
Yeah,
within 6 weeks, he got an X-ray done. Or after 6 weeks, he got an X-ray done, and the doctor was just like, "This is incredible." He was like, "How long ago again did this happen?" He's like,
mhm,
it looks as if it happened 3 months ago." Is kind of I think what the doctor had said, and it had
yeah.
only been 6 weeks. And I started
That's
tapping away, and I was like, "What's in cannabis that helps your bones bloody regrow?" Like, and then I found that CBG, it was the one that was being attributed to helping potentiate the regrowth of bone cells or something along those lines anyway.
yeah.
Or the
That sounds
fusion.
brilliant. I was going to say that actually. I actually wrote about CBG in the book, and it's interesting to know that the CBG was the initial. It's the precursor cannabinoid,
Right.
so it precursors all the consequential cannabinoids, and that's why it's predominantly found in hemp, because hemp doesn't allow for the metabolic process of changing from CBG to CBD, CBN, THC, all these kind of things. So yeah, it's it'd be interesting to try it. I mean, I think I've done a couple of product reviews on the channel as well about CBD. But I mean, have you tried it personally? Do you know? I know there's not any psychotropic element, but I mean, therapeutically, have you felt anything?
From CBG.
Yeah,
I got some CBG flowers actually given to me recently by one of the lads. Came from Little Collins. It's a CBD dispensary here,
right.
but they have CBG flowers now. And yeah, there was definitely a relaxed feeling, to be honest, from it. No, I will say I probably was a bit high consuming it, but it definitely yeah, there was definitely a nice vibe off it anyway. Like it was different to CBD, definitely. Yeah, I've consumed CBD after having some THC flowers, and yeah, I definitely think that the CBG is it's different to the CBD anyway, and there's a good potential there. I see some seed companies now are releasing strains that have more CBG in them. So even the seed companies are reacting to what is a growing desire there from the consumers out there. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. Have you ever
Well,
tried your hand at growing yourself?
growing.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the past it was quite interesting. Before I had kids were around and stuff like that, it was definitely something that was possible. But at the moment, the space is too inefficient, and that's why I just think it's hardly the weather here. You know, it's
Yeah.
hardly the weather for that kind of thing. But it's I'm sure at some point in the near future that'll be a probability.
few
Fingers crossed.
autoflowers by and get some gorilla growing done out in the wild. you,
Yeah.
you have wooded areas up there.
Yeah. No, I'm sure there's plenty of them, man. Honestly, it's so busy that he comes to the YouTube channel, man. There's no
Yeah,
time.
that's it. Or stick a seed in the earth by and let nature do the rest. It's incredibly simple actually as well when it boils down to it growing it. If we were all able to do it, I don't think there'll be that many people, to be honest, to do it, because there'll be enough being grown by those out there that you wouldn't really want to, because it's always an argument I hear for the right for people to grow is, oh, if everyone has the right to grow, sure, everyone will just grow it and there'll be cannabis everywhere and it'll be a mess.
Yeah.
But really, like, would it, like if you could grow your own cannabis in the morning, if it wasn't legal, or if you could go into a store and buy some from somebody who had grown it for the purpose of selling it, like, and it was good quality and all of that, like, which one would you be doing? Like, I yourself?
To be honest, in all honesty, I just think the basis of growing should be the initial step. It's like I think that's the reason why they don't ever put it into place either, is because that's the initial victory. If everybody's growing, there's no need for any corporate influence.
Yeah,
And I think that's what happens.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest worry, is that the corporate influence is going to take away our ability to have a right to grow our own. But
Yeah.
what I was saying is that if say if we had the market, if you had a choice in the morning to walk down to the store and buy some cannabis, or if you had a choice to grow some, like, as a consumer of it, which would you be
I'd
prefer?
definitely grow my own, because then you know what you're
Grow your
doing.
own, yeah?
Yeah, I would definitely say grow my own. I mean, the only thing is, do you know what it comes to when I think when you get it from a shop, is that they do have the intricacies to do fancy elements of it. So there's a social class element where you kind of feel, you know what I mean? If there's something in a wee fancy package, that's what I don't know if you've seen them
Yeah.
recently, but you have these things where it's like a £4,000 fucking joint, or these kind of things, and it's wrapped in some crazy thing and it comes in a fancy. But all this, you know, you see all the celebrities using this kind of thing
Yeah.
for novelty. That's essentially, you know, these companies can be used for that. But I think it's the same thing for medicine. You shouldn't really need to use a corporation for something that you can do yourself. And edibles, you know, you can, the YouTube and the internet has allowed you to do anything. You know, it really has. So you could learn anything.
Even in saying that though, like, buying your cannabis from a corporation, what if it was a collective? Like, what if there was a club you could subscribe your ability to grow some plants to, and they could grow 4 or 5 plants, 6 plants in your favor, and it was done on a community basis then, where it wasn't profit that was generating it. Which would motivate you then? Would you still want would you still choose to grow your own and take the effort, the time, or would you let the collective do it, and the passionate grower out there to do that, and you could continue your comics?
To be honest, I think the way I see it is that
I keep judging you, trying to get the other answer.
no, man. The thing is, do you know what? I think it's the same, man. I fully agree, and I think I assume that's the possibility anyway. If there's an individual growing in the house, that second option is an inevitability. So there would inevitably be obviously a local source as well.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what it is. It's just the idea of it being a locally sourced collection of individuals who are looking to benefit the community that they live in.
Yeah.
That, and then not having it that you can grow it in your own house, sounds bizarre. You know, so I just think to myself, if you're able to grow it in your house, then there's also this ability for a collective that you can also do in your favor. And I think Uruguay has that in place at the moment, I think, where you can grow, I think, between 10 and 20 plants, I think, but you can also grow up to 90 with a collective of individuals, and then you give that material over to like a pharmaceutical company or a corporation of some variety that's then put out to the public. So there is still that dynamic that's available, you know, and I think that's probably the best option, because it'd just be so, you know, can you imagine that? You can go down the shop and get stuff, but you couldn't do it in your house. It just sounds so authoritarian, you know.
Yeah, no, it would be messed up, all right. But there is a certain one, all right. But like, would you have that same mentality with your vegetables at all?
Yeah, I mean, the effort when it comes to vegetables, then like the thing is, it's like anything. I think we're in a situation as well. I mean, you've got Amazon, for instance, where stuff arrives at your door, man. It's like, I don't think there's really ever a position where everything shouldn't be be as an option, you know. So I think this is the thing. It's like that should be the case, but I think the basis of growing in the house seems to be the victory, you know.
No,
I
I certainly agree with you there. It is a victory. But I just met so many people over the time. Like, I can remember I was giving away cannabis plants there at one stage to people, and people just didn't want to grow it at all. And they were just like, well, why would I grow it when I can just buy it off your man over the road? And I just couldn't get past that mentality at all.
yeah.
And it was just something that I thought then, and I could hear the arguments that, oh, if everybody is right to grow, everybody would grow. And I'm just like, that's not what I've met at all out there.
No.
So many people just have no interest at all in growing. It's like I think that the novelty would wear off very fast.
100%, and I think that's one of the things that come through this as well often, is that people assume a polarized position when it comes to cannabis. So you're either all in for it or all against it. And the vast majority of people don't really care. You know, the only time we hear about this issue is from one side or the other. But the vast majority of people don't really care about cannabis. If anything, they would be, and it's not like don't care. It's like yeah, of course it should be legal. What's the problem? That care, you know, and
Yeah.
I think that's because most people will either know somebody or know somebody that knows somebody that's been positively impacted by cannabis. Nobody really knows anybody that's been negatively impacted.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know anybody any personally. Subjectively speaking, I don't know anybody that's been negatively impacted. So, and I just think that's the basis of it. You know, it's just it's sometimes the conversation gets kind of diluted on the basis of cannabis because of this, like, oh well, you're either for it or against it. It's like, no, we're in a society nowadays that it shouldn't be a discussion point. It's almost like the last relic of discussion when it comes to personal freedoms, almost, when it substance use in particular, because it seems when cannabis falls, as the psilocybin and MDMA and all these other substances that seem to also be getting much more research as cannabis is then kind of led the way almost.
Yeah. You know, I would agree with you. I'm hoping to even pick up that battle soon, because I think that we're close to a victory here with the cannabis one. I think 2021 is going to leave a lot to be, a lot of change will happen within this year. And then after that, I will certainly be focusing my effort there for the decriminalization of these other plant substances that you mentioned there, i.e. the psilocybin. What is your own experience there with psilocybin? Have you had many encounters with the?
I fucking love psilocybin. That's my favorite. That's my favorite psychedelic. Like, I would say that LSD for me, that I always say LSD felt mechanical. It felt man-made. You know, whereas psilocybin felt like it was enhancing sensory perception that was lying dormant, and that's what it seemed like. So you're already in a position. You know, it's almost like a heightened state of consciousness was waiting for you, and this was just a little, you know, key that allowed you to open it up. Yeah, it's like, I think the very first time I ever took psychedelics, I think I was about maybe 18, maybe. No, I wasn't. I was about 16 the very first time I took psychedelics, and we'd taken.
Right.
I was like hanging about like this primary school, and it's all dark, and like there's like, I remember there's like an orange light that was on the side of the walls, and there's like, I don't know, half a dozen of us there or so, and there was a guy that had mushrooms in it. He'd like, you know, they were like half frozen or something like that, and he's just kind of like handing them out, and I think we had like 10 or 11 or something like that, and I just remember the rest of the time just being like feeling the color orange. So we're standing in the light of this, but I was feeling orange, you know, and it was a very bizarre sensation to feel a color. And that's what it felt like. And I always remember turning around, there was a friend that was speaking to a friend that was sitting down, and it looked like he had no body. So it was just like his legs going straight up to his neck and these two arms sticking at the side. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, this guy looks ridiculous. Never thinking it was a consequence of the hallucinogen. Just looking at like, this guy's never looked right, man. Yeah. So I would say psilocybins. I would definitely say that's my most favorite psychedelic when excuse me, when the option arises, essentially, which has been relatively infrequent considering the lockdown.
Yeah, I've certainly enjoyed my encounters with psilocybin in the past, but it's a curious one that like there's I've a desire to do it. I have a desire to consume the mushrooms and go through the experience again. But it's like, it's not something I rush to do. It's aware of,
Yeah.
you know, the way you would go out for pints on a Friday, Saturday night, you wouldn't really think too much about it. But for me, with the mushrooms, like you do a lot of thinking about it actually before you take, at least for me anyway, in my own experience. Like I tend to, because when I read a couple of books on it, and one very good one was the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, and it really gets into the topic of setting and the mindset of the individual. And for me, I definitely do a lot of inner work. I have a lot of inner demons that I'd be battling with and stuff like that. And yeah, you know, it's certainly it's a weird one with the psychedelics, that there's almost an inbuilt mechanism within them against abuse of them. I think,
Yeah.
and that's my own experience.
I would feel agree, Martin. And interestingly, you saying that, being so introspective, like preceding the experience, is that it's interesting that, because I think that's almost part of it. You know, it's like I see the mushrooms, in all honesty, as this parental influence, and that's why you approach with caution, with very much respect, and it's really bizarre, because I think, in all honesty, magic mushrooms, DMT, things like that, they allow us to tweak our frequency to lower our perception, increase our sensory perception, and be able to see things not that are. Do you know, it's almost like a multi-dimensional type thing. Sometimes you hear, I don't know, Graham Hancock and individuals like that. I've mentioned this kind of thing, but I think there's something very special about these substances and something very metaphysical. And I think mysticism has a lot to play with the experience when it comes to these substances. And the symbology behind mysticism very often conforms to the symbology that's found in hallucinogenic experiences.
Yeah.
So it's very. It seems to be that consciousness is the playing field, the playing ground for this situation, and these substances at least allow us insight into things that ordinarily we wouldn't be able to see. You know, and I mean that in a much more figurative, way, not actually like seeing things as in like there's a dragon in front of me, that kind of thing. You know, it's like there's a symbolic meaning behind these use. However, as you mentioned, using them recreationally, like, oh, just have them a Friday night, that kind of thing, you won't experience the full potential of these substances. And I think that's why a lot of people don't acknowledge that, I didn't experience that. And it's like you have to go into it with a meditative approach. You know, you have to look at it like an education experience, an educational experience. That's how they should be treated. And I think anybody that's not really had that experience, or frustratingly, I think the narrative again behind these substances makes people kind of go on a bad one, if you describe it that way, before they've even taken it. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's all it is. So the intrigue of what to expect can sometimes be overshadowed by the paranoia of what's going to happen,
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you, definitely. I didn't try mushrooms until I was, nearly 25 or something like that. But it was MDMA I tried when I was about 17. I was 17. And that was a very interesting experience. It wasn't trippy or anything like that, obviously, but it was with my cousins, and it was at a part of my life. I was just there to find out my girlfriend was pregnant, and
Oh, good man.
yeah, get the job done early. And yeah, I was hanging out with my cousins, and we took some ecstasy. And man, the conversation I had, like, it was just like, how am I able to talk like this with these people? Because if that's not something I had within myself, to let this stuff out, the feelings and the emotions and stuff. It was just it was very relieving, I suppose, to just unburden myself with everything that I was keeping within me. And I credit it to the MDMA like that. It really allowed me to come to terms, and to just better understand and accept things that were going on at that time. Becoming a dad at such a young age, it was a tough thing to be dealing with, mentally anyway. And just haven't been able to have that conversation. It was fucking therapeutic in its own sense. Like, and yeah, even that, like, I would take those pills. I'm a weird fish. Like, my cousins and them used to be drinking and all of this crack, taking the ecstasy. And I used to always be giving out to them. It's like, boys, get a bottle of water, like 2 bottles of water even, and a box of fags, and we're sorted. Like, what you want drink for? Sure, we're taking yolks. Like, you can't get drunk when you're on yolks. Like, I just didn't understand the mentality. Like, but I don't know. I'm a bit of a weird one like that. But I definitely benefited therapeutically, like, on some serious level. Like, it was crazy.
No, I'm the same. Like, I fully agree with what you're saying here, Martin, because it's the same. Like, alcohol has never been something I've ever been drawn to, and I think there's nothing against people who drink alcohol. Many times there's a crossover where people consume cannabis and drink alcohol. It's I think that alcohol should be legal. It should be. I think, in all honesty, I don't think there's any substance that should be illegal if there's a consenting adult that's willing to consume it.
Yeah.
I think I included it in the book. That guy, J.S. Mills, English philosopher who wrote On Liberty, and it kind of articulates the basis of freedom. So he was the one that came up with the thing where it's my freedom to swing my fist ends at the entrance of your face. So it means essentially that as long I can do whatever I like, as long as it doesn't influence the freedom of somebody else. So I can, and if I choose to literally drink myself to death, that is my God-given right as a sovereign human. I believe that. I believe that people are in a situation where they shouldn't be policed into consumption of any substance whatsoever. And it's just, and I think also he articulates it quite well, because I wrote this in the book, and he says it quite well, where he says the opinions of all people should be always interrogated and assaulted, essentially, because then your opinion never turns into dead dogma. And I think that's what's happened, is that we've spent so long with dead dogma in the form of cannabis is bad for you, causes schizophrenia, that we're almost kind of trying to realign how we see substances in general. And it's a tremendous step forward, and it certainly seems like something that's never going to be. I can't see it in any way. I'm sure you're the same, that there's no way we're going back 20 years. I mean, even in the 1990s, it was like the cannabis was way more frowned upon than it is now. You know, and I just think research is helping a huge way, because the endocannabinoid system was only discovered really as a consequence of decades of research, but essentially in 1892, 93 summed it up. You know, so yeah, it's one of those things where I'm hoping the progress continues, and then things like the Project 21, psilocybin research is being done by independent researchers. This is all collectively helping, and the only thing I think that will fall then is maybe legislation. That's the only thing that can fall. There's inevitably enough pressure it's going to put there, but frustratingly, the circumstance also shows us that we're kind of going through at the moment, shows us that how powerless we are against the authorities. So we can yell and bang and scream as much as we want, but the reality is, unless there's an incentive from the authorities, which most likely is always financially based, things are not going to change. And that seems like that's the only reason why this would even happen this year at all, is that COVID has destroyed the economy, and it seems to be the only viable option to reignite it as much as required as cannabis, you know, because there are so many different avenues of finance that will be pursued because of it.
Yeah, no, and that's again, it brings back the worry that if it is finance that motivates the change in this, we mightn't end up with the best policies. But because there's another thing that does change the way in which government behaves, and it's not always financial. The other one is it's people, like people getting out there and motivating people like yourself now, just getting messages out there to people. What I do myself is activism. I encourage people to get out and protest, and I'll be doing a lot of it this year because we've a bill before our government in Ireland being put before or put up by people before profit, and the only way that's going to get supported, and it's not going to be money that's going to change the government's mind, although maybe a few brown envelopes might sort of come out all right, like, but I don't have them to give them. But it's just going to be people, like, because there's so many people affected by this. You know, you have the patients, you have the people getting criminalized, and then you have the people who have to hide the fact that they're cannabis consumers. You know, that in itself is damaging to a person. Like, you know, if you can't even do a thing like a post on Facebook because your boss might see it, and what kind of
Yeah.
an existence are you living? Because it's not a life you're living, like you're just existing, like you're not
It's
being
actually
true
quite
to yourself.
Yeah, it's actually quite funny you saying that. When you asked me earlier, like, what was the response? That was one of the things when starting to work that I heard often, like, "What? You can't do this. You're going to lose your job," and all that kind of thing. It's like, I'm not hurting anybody, man, and this is all going to fall into place. This is going to happen, and I think it's actually came in my favor having Canna Man as a cartoon character. You know, it's almost kind of made it relatively impenetrable because it adds a satirical protection on top of what I'm attempting to achieve with the channel. You know, it's like he's got a cartoon character, but we'll prosecute him and put him in jail. It's like, come on, man, he's
Yeah.
busting to draw a cartoon. You know what I mean? And it does make some people, like, I've had a few people that's turned around and said that they became more interested in the basis of cannabis just from some of the material. So sometimes different directions are helpful, and what you're describing, you know, getting out there, becoming active, informing more people, will inevitably form new ideas from these new people that maybe previously, even 18 months ago, were not involved with cannabis, and we required them to have their initiative to then cause legitimate change, you know, or at least consequential change on top of what's already been going on. Because one of the things I think that I would point out is that it's that thing that you say. It kind of feels like we're kind of standing on the shoulders of giants. You know, we've spent decades of cannabis battling. You know, that's why we know people like Jack Herer and like people like Tommy Chong, who went to jail for a fucking bong.
Yeah.
You know, it's like things. People like this are the legitimate veterans of fighting cannabis prohibition, because they were doing it at a time when it wasn't just people like, oh, some people like it, some people don't. They were doing it at a time when everybody was against cannabis. It was the reefer madness and all these things, you know. So yeah, these are the people that we should really be grateful for. And hopefully there'll be more of these people that will come to the forefront and help push it forward.
Yeah, no, certainly there will be, for sure. What is that scene like there in Scotland at the moment for cannabis legalization? I'm aware of some of the patients over. I believe Karen Gray is over.
Yeah, Karen Gray, yeah.
Yeah, I believe she's over your neck of the woods and stuff. But what's it like for the other side of it, the non-medical campaign? Is there much of a community there? Is there much kind of cannabis legalization groups? Efforts
Yeah,
on.
yeah. No, Karen's great. Obviously, recreationally, it's there is the entire community. I mean, we have the Scottish cannabis community. It has like 10,000 followers on Facebook, you know, and that's substantial in itself. Constantly you see on the page, in Scottish cannabis community Facebook page, you see people from Canada and different parts of the world, you know, getting in contact and a very friendly and helpful manner, just interacting and stuff like that, which kind of just shows that it's like the cannabis community in Scotland is as alive as anywhere, you know, and it's because everywhere has pockets of activity. It's just the willingness to which they're willing to display that activity essentially differs. But the quantity of people that are actually engaged with cannabis seems to be relatively consistent almost everywhere. And Scotland's no different. I mean, we have, I think, maybe a dozen or so maybe cannabis social clubs at the moment. And in all honesty, activism wise, I've kind of got a bit of a you know, just something that I would really like to engage with that I'm hoping to happen this year. So, and that will involve cannabis social clubs. So, so anybody that's listening here that's got a cannabis social club in Scotland, keep your ears open, man. Might be getting in contact.
Excellent.
So yeah, so it's
tour of them.
Sorry?
I'll have to do a tour of them and visit Gary's as well.
Yeah, well, that's my intention. Once lockdown goes down, it was to do that. It was to do like a cannabis social club review kind of thing, and you go to different cannabis social clubs. But yeah, so that's hopefully that'll happen sooner rather than later. That'll be really good.
Yeah, had the COVID put a dampener on all of that stuff. So over there as well. Are you in lockdown?
It certainly did.
Moment,
yeah. Sorry?
Are you in lockdown and stuff at the moment?
Yeah, we're exactly the same. Essentially, it's like, I mean, apart from going back and forth from work, it's essentially extremely restricted movement. You know, it's
but before the lockdown and stuff like that, was there would you have had active kind of 420 events and things like that, or kind of days actually where people would meet up and socialize? I know down in Brighton and places like that, they kind of got good stuff, or good events that they hold there once a year. I don't know, they have Green Pride, I think is the name of one of them. But is there anything like that up your way?
Yeah, there's Glasgow 420 in the Green. They have that, and obviously that's was it obviously April 20th. You know, and you know, apart from that, there's you see the odd pockets of people describing the same thing, but the only thing that could really be said is activity needs to increase everywhere, and it's the same thing in Scotland. Activity needs to accelerate. There needs to be more communication, and that's where, in all honesty, I actually got emailed by an individual the other day who'd proposed something that's just gives evidence that people that ordinarily wouldn't be engaged with cannabis are becoming active, and that's what's a positive thing. You know, you have like Holistic Hemp Scotland, that's a relatively extremely efficient CBD company. Actually, they're obviously certainly making their presence known when it comes to CBD industry, and that's they've got really fantastic products. There's no marketing here, by the way. This is just my own experience. You know, that's all it is. You know, and that's, so they've got really good products, and it's the same. It just seems to be that there is a higher just a higher grade of cannabis conversation that's going on, and you would have noticed that anyway. Most people that's watching this would have noticed that the higher grade of cannabis is not in no small part being played by the tents. People have now experienced a much higher quality product, and because of this indoor grow revolution, essentially, that's happened in the past 20 years through Amazon and grow tents. So yeah, I just think it's moving in the right direction. It just really needs to kind of pick up momentum, really, you know.
Certainly does. Hopefully this whole COVID thing blows over soon, because I'm already making plans for a 420 event here in Cork City, and I know of other ones that are being planned for other places around Ireland too, which is always a ball. It's because there's other kick-ass events go on all around the world on 420, like, so, and you can only be at one of them, so yeah, I have to be at the one I organise.
Yeah, quite right. That's good thinking.
Yeah, but it'll be good to see all the footage afterwards. Hopefully that there'll be a lot of events there this year. Like, there was another 4 states over in the US added to the list of states that legalize cannabis. And now with the play of the Senate there, the Senate's owned by the Democratic Party now. Pretty much it's 50-50 split, but the Vice President, who is a Democrat herself, will get to split the vote. And that means that MORE Act should more likely now pass, and which will see cannabis be federally decriminalized,
Excellent.
which would be amazing. Like that's going to have send shockwaves across the world in the cannabis sense. Like, so there's a lot to be looked forward to certainly this year.
Yeah, that's tremendous, man.
On that term, is there much to be looked forward to from yourself?
Certainly. Let's say there's 2 or 3 things that I've got in the works that I would not say about right at this moment, but definitely, man, there's some exciting stuff happening, and I'm really hoping that this is the year that becomes. I mean, the entirety of last year was kind of alignment of who, like, trying to figure out when you're doing something new, you inevitably become somebody different. And I think that's what's been going on. There's been a transition to the channel, but also a personal transition where it's like I'm realigning myself to be a person that is much more inventive, and I think that's all it is, and much more confident about the possibility of human endeavor in general.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just it's all helpful and everything just taken in place. In all honesty, speaking to yourself, excuse me, and other individuals, it's all the more clarified that the thought process that I'm engaged in is legitimate. It's not just unique to myself either. You seem to be very much in the same path, the same drive, you know, and it's the same thing. And I think the cannabis community industry is really good for displaying that kind of thing, because there's so much invention, entrepreneurships, and because it's new, you know, so it reflects endeavor, you know. So it's yeah, this year it should be good, and the animation and the comics and stuff like that. They've got a couple of books at this moment. The next week, actually, coming this following week, I've got I'm putting up the website. So you'll be able to buy the book A Case for Cannabis. It's on Amazon now. You'll be able to buy it through the website. You'll also be able to buy all the Canna Man comics through the website, and t-shirts and the mugs. However, like the mugs won't have a wee green handle on it. Most likely, it'll probably just be all white, I think. But apart from that, I think. Yeah, so I've got the website. There's a couple of books that I'm doing just not related to the channel, but just illustrated based that I did a couple of years ago, maybe last year. One of them's a relationship compilation book of like 30 pictures of humanist situations, and there's another one where it's a dad's illustrated guide. Because you're a dad, I'll send you one for free. You know, you'll love it, man. It'll give you a giggle, and that's all it is. So it's essentially I'm going to tie these things up in the next week, so they'll become available on Amazon as well, probably like a $5 or something. So yeah, so it's like it's just onwards and upwards. I need to just keep working hard.
Happy days, man. No, that's the job. And before I let you go, there was one more thing I wanted to talk to you about, and we kind of touched off a while ago, but we went away from it, which is the dimethyltryptamine, the DMT.
Oh yeah.
We were mentioning it there the last day as we were chatting on your own show, but your own experience with it. How did that come about? How did that journey start anyway? Like, where did you first hear of DMT, and what made you intrigued about it?
Well, the first time I'd heard about it was actually through Terence McKenna, before Joe Rogan. Most people, it's the go-to guy is Joe Rogan when it comes to DMT. But yeah, that's what I mean, man. It's like you can't really talk about DMT without mentioning his name, really. You know, but it's yeah. So it was like Terence McKenna, big fan of Terence McKenna, and him talking about DMT, and it just seemed so fantastical. You know, it just seemed ridiculous that this can happen, that you can transport it to this other realm and all these different other things. It just seemed so improbable, intrigued me. And I'm relatively, like, you know, interested guy when it comes to things that are relatively, I don't know, not normal, but it is normal. It's just difficult to kind of, you know, get the right word for it. Yeah, so I was always kind of interested in that kind of thing. Ended up managing to source it. Also watched the DMT spirit molecule. I watched that, which was were really interesting, in particular when you've got like neuroscientists and mathematicians, people that have got a really sound articulation of human physiology, describing this realm of the unknown. And it's like the mathematician guy in particular, I can't remember his name, Abraham something. He described it as if like it's almost, it possibly could be a example of a new form of dark matter, or some form of like different plane that's only became new. And it made a few examples of like gravity was only discovered like before the 1600s or something like that, I think. And then it's like then he fast forwards to the 1800s when he makes a physics discovery that was also instrumental. I forget which one he was talking about. And then so he used this as an example that this could potentially be the realm of the consciousness, this new dimensional thing. So all of this implied, you know, like just in inquiry, essentially, just this has to be researched. So I eventually was able to acquire it. And unfortunately didn't have a breakthrough experience, and the amount we had wasn't sufficient. But the thing I remember that I'm very conscious of is that as soon as I took it, my entire body went numb. Like you don't really feel anything like that at all. It's like your body wasn't, like, you weren't associated with your body, and there was just this ascension feeling where it's like I was just getting like shot in a direction, essentially, and it was like essentially that's what it was like. And I had this distinct sensation of like this way, come on, this way, and you go. So I kind of kept going up and up, and that's what it kind of felt like, the transporting kind of thing. And it's kind of like it peaked kind of thing, and then it was like a sensation. In all honesty, what it felt like was that there was this individual, this being type, like dark shadow thing, like calling me over, and it felt that I was good, well intentioned, but a bit of a like somebody that needed to be ironed out slightly or something like that. It was just like there was something there. It was like, yeah, I'm aware of your good intentions. You just need to fucking sort yourself out a bit. It was something like that. That's what it kind of felt like. And then as I experienced that feeling, I just kind of felt like it was just kind of floating back down again. And then by this point, I've then opened my eyes and like everything's completely distorted. And there's like nothing but like between me and the person I was doing it with. He was on the other side. We just took it exactly the same time. He had one of the pipes, I had one of the same time. And there's just nothing but like these almost matrix like green lines between me and him. So absolutely everywhere in the room it was like every single factor in the room was connected, and it was just these like green beams. So I was looking at my arms, and it was the same thing. It was like I can see the entire fabric of how it was made, and there was this green. It was just extremely bizarre, but I don't know. And that's what it kind of seemed like. And then it's like because then after we did it, because I didn't get the breakthrough, and tried it again. Same again. It was just unsuccessful. But I think what was going on was because we just did it in a standard pipe. It was kind of just burning it most likely. So I think that's why. So the next time, what I've done, I actually intend to, because I've got the intention to buy the wee glass pipe, vaporize it properly, and just do it that way. But the second time I took it, I just kept my eyes open this time, and same again. It just seemed like everything was like geometrically angled. So there was a mirror on the wall and I remember looking at the mirror on the wall, and just the right angle of the corner of the mirror, because of the inside of the mirror and the outside of it. It sounds bizarre saying this, but like it was just everlasting. So you kind of looked down the side of it, and it was like it just went down this long tunnel. But it was the inside of the mirror, and it was all this different kind of stuff that just seemed like depth and gravity and stuff like that. It was very bizarre. But yeah, that was unfortunately my experience. I say unfortunately because my intention was to meet the beings and chat to the elves and what's going down, people. That kind of thing.
Yeah, no, it's certainly something to behold. All right, once you have that breakthrough experience, but as well, it's very hard to bring stuff back. Like what you described there, it's pretty good. It's interesting. You've gotten just on the edge of it there, but you didn't really get brought over. But yet you still there was an interaction there. Like you're still relaying like that feeling that was there, like of this other presence or something. There's this other kind of I don't know, intelligence anyway that is beckoning you on when you experience the DMT.
It was bizarre because the friend that I was doing it with as well, he described a similar sensation. So when I was getting it felt like pulled up, and that's what it felt like. It felt like from my feet up. As soon as I'd taken the first, inhaled it the first time, as I'm blowing it out, but it's like my whole body kind of felt like it was shaking a bit numb almost, and I felt that from the feet up. And then I went to take the second toke, and it kind of felt like my arms were kind of shaking almost as well. And then it was like, by this point I was like went to essentially put the thing down, and he was the same thing. He was doing the exact same. And then when this being thing, it was just like a silhouette, and it was just kind of like it seen me as a rascal, but it knew I was trying my best. That's what it felt like, and it was comforting. But at the same time, I was kind of like, could have been better. Really could have been better. But I have every intention on breaking through that barrier and getting to the other side. Because my friend was the same. He described when he'd had it. Relative anesthesia sensation, and then it's like he described it as if there was a party going on away to the left of him, like it was away on the left, and there was music and there was noise and there was welcoming. He kept referring to like come on over here, and he says he was going up over to there, and then it was the same thing, peaked and then kind of like descended again, and didn't quite manage to break through to that fucking party on the other side.
What about ayahuasca? Would you be brave enough to try a brew of that?
Without a doubt, honestly, all of this stuff. Like, in all honesty, Martin, it's the same thing with I can't remember the guy's name, but I have an interest in all of this stuff, and I think that this isn't just these are material manifestations of legitimate tools that enter our consciousness into the metaphysical world. And I think that's the best. That's how I see it, is that they are tools. We as humans are very imperialistic, so we have to look at objective hard fact, and we refuse to acknowledge the fact that it's everything's almost frequency based on the baseline. So, and that's what these substances I feel do. This is the material tool that's used so that we can kind of jump through to the next metaphysical place.
Yeah, it certainly is. There's certainly stuff around us that we aren't aware of, and when you take these psychedelics, like it's just very hard to understand that this actually exists around us. Like, and when you take these substances, your brain tunes into that kind of that world, that playing, that existence, whatever it is. And it's very similar then between people, like you were with your friend, and you both kind of had that very similar experience. You heard the studies that Rick Strassman did and stuff, and a
Yeah.
lot of the experiences, they were very, very similar. And it's just like, that's too coincidental. That's just like, John, there's something
Yeah.
else to this. Like,
100%. I would actually add, Martin, as well, that one of the things a lot of people will testify to this is no, this is just a consequence of pre-existing beliefs within the individual. But the thing that kind of counteracts that is you have atheists that interact with these substances,
Yep.
and they experience the sense of a being, of guidance, of an omnipresent situation where out with their grasp. And again, that's what gives the credibility then, because then that implies not a pre-existing belief, but perhaps a biological, like, representation of something that already exists within us, and these substances just activate that on the very basis.
Well, when you look at some of the old stories and scriptures and stuff, like you've a lot of stories there where people would go off and they would go away for weeks, maybe months on end, and then they would come back with information and stuff. A lot of the times these journeys would have been kind of, some of the times the meditative journeys, or else they'd be using sacraments. The Soma was one that's reckoned to contribute to a lot of knowledge of the Greeks or some ancient civilizations anyway. But this is stuff that we've forgotten. Like, these are tools, like as you said, tools that we once knew how to use, or once we were like familiar with using anyway, and that we benefited from using. And they're tools that have been taken away from us now. It's very strange, that when we look at the plant or the banned plants, it's cannabis is banned, psilocybin mushrooms are banned. But why isn't digitalis foxglove banned, when I could go and collect it down the road? I could make a tea from it, and I could put somebody into cardiac arrest from that tea. And there's no prohibition of that plant. It's grown on a hedgerow out there. There's no active effort to clear Ireland of this poisonous, deadly plant. But yet we have it for cannabis. We have it for psilocybin mushrooms. They grow bloody everywhere, but you can't pick them. They're illegal as soon as you pick them. It's just like,
No, you're exactly right, Martin. And you know what? I actually wrote about that in the book about synthetic cannabinoids as one of the chapters, and I use that as an example of with the absence of cannabis due to prohibition, there was the arrival of legal highs, and the legal highs were, as you've just mentioned, like they were just little plant-like material that was easily smoked as a herb, and sprayed on top of these were synthetic cannabinoids, which were antagonists to cannabinoid receptors, and consequently made everybody unwell. People were dying. They weren't made illegal. These are plants, and it was the same scenario. I'm aware that the synthetic element was the poisonous element, but nevertheless, it was still something that was allowed to be in the public domain type thing, consumed. Whereas cannabis, which interacts symbiotically with the human body, isn't. It's prohibited, which is just it's an absolute farce.
Yeah, no, it certainly is. The whole thing's a fucking joke. It's robbing us of our humanity, really. Like, when you look at it, some of these substances, you can see why they would want to be banned if you're an authority figure, because a lot of the times they lead you to question authority. There's kind of like, they question the way in which we live, because they open you up to more of your humanity. And I don't know, to put it into the terms, I suppose, kind of a socialist, communist way of being. Like, you don't want to live in a capitalist society anymore. You're just like, you want to live, and you want to like put out good into the world and not do bad and all that kind of stuff. That comes with psychedelics, whereas that's not in favor of the government, who want you to go to work, and just have no passion at all in life, or real passion anyhow.
No, I completely agree, Martin. It's very difficult. I mean, it's a very difficult circumstance. Society is made up on the capitalistic basis, but I think what technology has made it, like, no, it's a technocracy almost. So it's the technological run society. So we're in a position that social change, grassroots change could come at a time where technology has made our lives better, increased the standard of living, but has not continuously perpetuated, I should say, the inequality basis of finance. But you hear it all the time, you've got like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all these different guys with like astronomical amounts of money. It's like, it seems like something's got to give. It can't be this situation come some dystopia scenario where it's like they have like their own city and stuff like this, just ridiculous.
Yeah, it certainly would. All right. I don't know, they on about it actually in the Joe Rogan podcast. Like, how much is Earth worth? Like, if you were to accumulate all of the like the stuff on art, like how much is it actually worth, like if you were to put a value on it, like, and is that much money in existence currently?
Yeah.
It'd be a weird thought project, but let's not go down that one. I think
Yeah.
we might let it go there, because I can smell dinner coming up the stairs to me. I'm getting
That sounds good, man. Sounds good.
yeah, but is there anything you would like to add in there? Anywhere you would like to send people outside of Cannaman TV on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook?
Yeah, I think that's it. Just Cannaman TV, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. That's essentially at the moment. I'm planning on getting Instagram up and running, but that's most likely probably this week at some point. But you can also get me on Patreon as well, where you can get what's coming next, that kind of stuff. Cannaman animation should be appearing soon, hopefully within the next 6 weeks at the very most. But at the same time, that will be dependent on other work factors. But you can find me there. You can also get me on Amazon if you type in Conor Macleod. You can find my work on Amazon. A Case for Cannabis, you'll find the book there. And this coming week, the website should hopefully up and running. So I'll make sure and put the links up on Facebook, Patreon, and Twitter.
Excellent, man. That's the job. Thanks very much for taking the time to come on the podcast anyway, and sharing the story of Cannaman. I'll certainly be keeping an eye out for him, and I might have him feature on the show if, from time to time, maybe.
Excellent. Thanks, man. I really enjoyed this, man. Really appreciate it.
Animations as well with him, is that right?
Sorry?
You're getting into some animations as well with Cannaman, possibly in the not too distant future?
Oh, definitely. That's the stage. I'm actually at the moment just beginning that. So it's Cannaman animation. It's going to be 1 minute segments of Cannaman. Most likely I'll probably do the voice. Apologies for that, everybody. So I'll probably just do that kind of thing. And yeah, so like I'll start off as 1 minute segments, and then this will become the cannabis animation, and that's what this is. Manifest your destiny, everybody. The ability of your potential is the limits of your imagination, and the limit of Cannaman is going to be, the intention is to make it as big as Family Guy, The Simpsons, and cue the laughter, but there's plenty of time, so let's watch this.
Yeah, no, I look forward to it. If I can help to promote it any more, than let me know, because I'm more than excited to see this thing grow.
Excellent. Really appreciate that, Martin, man. This has been dynamite as always. And let's say, man, just keep in touch and keep working hard, man. This is brilliant.
Indeed, you too, man. And there you have it, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Conor Macleod of CannamanTV. Guys, just to remind you, if you want to get your hands on his book, you can find copies of it through Amazon.com, and I also see it up on Waterstones too. So there's a couple of avenues there. It's CannamanTV is his YouTube page also, if you'd like to follow him there, and I believe he's on Twitter by the same name too. The name of the book as well is A Case for Cannabis. You can find that on Amazon. And you can also find some of his other comic books up there too. And Conor also has a Patreon too. So do go check those out. There'll be links down in the description of the show as well, guys, for anybody who wishes to find out more about Conor or find those books too. So thanks again to Conor. And guys, thanks very much for tuning in to today's episode of Martin's World. Stay blazed, guys, and keep her lit. Much love. Peace.